1974 festival, also put on by Alan Speer. Alan did this for years, and Alan went abroad years ago and did a lot of stuff for UTV himself and Billy Patterson. And as usual, McGee's
Anderson mingled informally with the guests at the reception and was introduced to many of the local townspeople. The President earlier in the day had paid his first official visit to Tory Island by helicopter, but showed no signs of weariness as he chatted with the people at the reception. Little did any of them realize that just 3 months later they would be mourning his sudden death. This was to be his last visit to Letterkenny. On this occasion, as on many others, he displayed the qualities that endeared him to so many of the Irish people. It was expected that after the reception at the Regional College, the President would drive to the Market Square for the official opening ceremony. But when he discovered that the festival committee were going to walk in the parade, he decided that he and Mrs. Childers would walk in the procession also. The arrangements for the reception at the Regional College were carried out by the ladies of the Letterkenny ICA, some of whom are seen here admiring the floral decorations. The President and Mrs. Childers joined the parade as it lined up at the bottom of the Port Road. The members of the festival committee formed up behind the Garda Band from Dublin, making their first appearance in Donegal. Also taking part in the parade were the impressive Irish Army Band of the Western Command and the popular local Letterkenny accordion band. The crowds lined along the streets gave the President a wonderful reception and were obviously delighted to see him walking in the parade. In his opening speech, the President spoke of his pleasure at being invited to open Letterkenny's 6th International Folk Festival. He went on later to say,
"In the advancing world in which we live, we see Letterkenny growing in industrial and social importance. And I'm so glad to hear of the coming of the great factory that will eventually employ 1,000 people. And Letterkenny has indeed been advancing in prosperity for a number of years. So I think it's important to say a few words about what seems to me to be of very great importance in relation to the future social growth of the town of Letterkenny and its people, and it applies to any town in Ireland. And the first essential requirement for any town in this modern age of ours is to have the people feel a sense of total community consciousness, a sense of being responsible for the entire moral and social and cultural welfare of the people in the town. The people not simply living as separate human beings, but feeling a sense of involvement in everything that goes on. Now you've been set a splendid example by the committee of the Letterkenny Folk Festival in how a voluntary committee can begin to organize things and to bring about a festival of this kind. And there are other organizations in Letterkenny who are working for the common good. Well, now, if people get together, and if they have a sense of community consciousness, why then, a great many things can be done. We can look after the old, the disabled, and the sick in a better way, and make improvements in the community services. We can, above all, find out what are the needs for young people in the way of recreation, in the way of athletics, in the way of providing them centers where they can do their thing, where they can get further education, where they can enliven their hearts and minds, in a world where they're going to have a great deal more spare time than their fathers or their grandfathers had. And so, in this way, the people come together and the town grows in social strength and grows in Christian purpose. Now, a second and essential feature in our modern world is that the younger generation should get to know the people of other nations, should get to know their singing, their dancing, their culture, and their social ideals. And so the International Festival is important in that we invite here people from other countries to dance and sing in the streets of Letterkenny, so that we can share with them their own ideals and begin to understand them. I think it's true to say that when we have people coming It encourages our own Irish traditional dancing and singing. And the people of Letterkenny are therefore set a challenge that when they have people from abroad to come and sing and dance here, that they should bring the best groups they can from Letterkenny and from other places in order to ensure that we retain our own cultural traditions.
Little Katrina Nallen presented Mrs. Childers with a bouquet, after which the President raised the festival flag. Then President Childers and Mrs. Childers and his party moved to the Scala Cinema to attend a celebrity concert. With the official formalities over, the festival proper got underway. The singing pub competition always attracts an enthusiastic audience. The first session in Fox's Bar was packed to capacity and featured the popular group from Dublin, the Somertons. At the festival's opening dance in the Golden Grill, the selection of the festival colleen attracted a crowd of pretty girls. Eventually, the judges picked Miss Patty Reid, a student teacher from Illustrin, as the winner. Well-known RTE television producer Tom McGrath presented her with her sash and trophy. Meanwhile, back at the Market Square, there was free entertainment with band recitals from the Garda and Army bands and folk dancing displays by the group of Breton dancers from France, while yet another crowd were enjoying a folk concert at the Ballyrain Hotel. Friday morning now, and one of the first attractions on the street was the Garda Band, who delighted the crowd with their lively playing and formation marching. Unfortunately, the Garda Band could not stay for the rest of the festival, and before long, it was time to say farewell. The festival flower show in the Literary Institute attracted a large and colourful entry. The show was capably arranged by Mrs. Dorothy Hanley and the ICA, and the adjudicator was Mrs. Jensen, president of the EFAS. Winner of the Alan Speer Cup for the best overall in the show was Mrs. Nora McConnell, High Road. Runner-up was Mrs. Miller from Kilmacrennan. The cup presented by Mrs. Hanley for the best in the children's section was won by Mary McMeehan, New Line Road. The runner-up was Karina Hanley, College Road. Joint third were Porrick McGeehan, New Line Road, and Mary McCauley, Lakeview. Also on view in the Literary Institute were the exhibits in the Children's Art Competition, which was judged by the well-known artist from Church Hill, Mr. Derrick Hill. He complimented the children on the high standard of work and said it made his job of judging very difficult. The competition was organised by Mrs. Con Curran, Port Road. The winner in the 4 to 6-year-old class was Vincent Farrelly, New Line Road. In the 6 to 8-year-old class, it was Thomas Crossan, a pupil at the Woodlands National School. The winner in the 8 to 10-year-old class was Desmond McMonigal from Glenswilly National School. In the 10 to 12-year-olds, it was Grania O'Boyle, a pupil at Woodlands National School. In the oldest age group, 12 to 14 years old, the first prize went to Declan McGuigan from Lorgy Brack. Letterkenny was crowded with visitors for the festival weekend, and many inquiries were made at the festival office at Main Street, where most of the time Miss Mary Whitney was on duty. A new feature of this year's festival was Radio Letterkenny. Local disc jockey Niall Anthony was in charge, playing requests and keeping the public informed of what was happening at the different events during the weekend. On Friday evening, the young people took over the streets for the soapbox derby and other novelty events and races. The director of operations was Mr. Patsy O'Donnell as usual, and once the traffic had been diverted elsewhere, the races got underway. As a change this year, the street entertainments were held on the Port Road, which provided a straight run for the soapbox derby and a good view from start to finish for the spectators. In the 20-mile cycle race, Tommy Burns from Drumkeen finished first ahead of Eddie McCarran from McMahon Villas. In the final of the soapbox derby, Dan Shields held off the challenge of M. McHugh from New Line Road to win very comfortably. Other winners in the later races were Mary McCafferty from Ardcolmkill, Eddie McDermott of the Long Lane, and M. McGeehan from the New Line Road. On Friday night at the Ballyrain Hotel, there was a special treat for the ladies when Mrs. Jensen gave a talk and demonstration on flower arranging. Mrs. Jensen, who had earlier judged the flower show, is an expert on the subject, having adjudicated top shows including Balmoral in Belfast and the RDS in Dublin. There was a large attendance of interested ladies, and afterwards the flowers used in the arrangements done by Mrs. Jensen during the evening were raffled. Meanwhile, the singing pub competition had reached the newly opened Three Ways Motel. Leading the floor were two Norwegian visitors, part of the group that had performed at previous Letterkenny festivals and who had become such favourites with the local people. Providing the music here were the ever-popular Black Brothers Band. One of the most popular events for the older generation during the festival is the waltzing competition. Heats had been held for several weeks past, and now on Friday night the finalists were on the floor. Finally, after a lot of deliberation, the judges declared that the winners were Mr. and Mrs. Byrne Norrie from Ramelton. The prizes were presented by Senator Bernard McGlinchey. Early on Saturday morning now, preparations were underway in various parts of the town for the big parade later in the afternoon. As usual, the ICA put in plenty of work on their float. This year they made a special effort in creating a huge cake to celebrate their 21st birthday session. The newly formed Letterkenny Girl Guide Company entered the float in the parade for the first time and were at work early to ensure that all was ready and securely arranged. At the Letterkenny Technical School, lunchtime finds the visiting groups coming together. Nellie Callahan and her staff of volunteer helpers cope with the huge problem of feeding all the groups of singers and dancers who are taking part in the festival. Some of the groups hardly take time to eat, as they are so busy exchanging views with other visitors and learning new dances and songs. This is an aspect of the festival largely unseen by the general public, which for the groups is so important. Many contacts and friendships are formed during these informal meetings and help to make the international flavour of the festival so interesting. The local people of the town can only gain also from this contact with so many friendly visitors from foreign parts. After lunch, the participants in the parade begin to assemble along the new road from the station to the old town. The amount of work undertaken in the preparation of the displays now becomes apparent as the time approaches for the parade to begin. This is undoubtedly the big spectacular event of the Letterkenny International Folk Festival, and once again fine weather was laid on to encourage the crowds to turn out. The IFA agricultural section is traditionally led by some old-timers, showing off the old implements used in the days before tractors and combines transformed the farming business. When all was ready, the parade set off, led by the Letterkenny accordion band, looking very smart in their new uniforms. Behind them came the IFA old-timers, demonstrating how sowing and reaping were carried out in the old days with fiddle and scythe. Davy Sweeney showed the crowd how thrashing used to be done with the flail, while Sam Cheatley played a tune on the fiddle. Then after that we saw the modern farming scene illustrated from planting to harvesting. First came the tractor and plough, driven by Davy Carson. This was followed by a disc harrow driven by Joseph Bowl. Well-known contractor Sam Stevenson came next with a seeder. After the seed is sown, it has to be rolled. Eddie Sweeney was on the roller. Davy Russell comes next on his combine. Bobby Doherty is the expert on emptying slurry tanks and septic tanks. The Rafo Pipe Band led out the next section of the parade, illustrating the haymaking. First came the tractor and mower, driven by Noel Russell. This was followed by two types of hay turners. Jim Hamilton on the wheel. Jim Spratt from Grieve illustrated the hay cart. And then came a baler driven by Willie Sweeney. The silage cutter was provided by David Macaulay. The potato harvest was the next section. First came the potato planter, driven by John Gilday. Then came the potato sprayer, driven by Desmond Harris. And finally, the potato harvester itself, shown by Bobby Orr and his friends. The prize for the best float in the agricultural section was won by the Old Irish Kitchen. This exhibit is now established as a regular feature of the parade, but is one which Mrs. Ian Stevenson, who is responsible for its decoration, manages to improve each year. Barney Doherty on the fiddle. A very popular float with the spectators was the Old Forge. This was operated by Dougal Clark, with Charlie Murray doing his best to lend a hand. There was much praise for their courage in taking such a large horse through the noisy streets on a flat trailer. Another of the runners-up in this section was the Northwest Cattle Breeding Society exhibit.